Well, welcome everybody to the second edition of the Power Hour. Delighted today to be speaking to Louise Donadieu from Avidity Marketing in Jersey. Morning, Lou. How are you doing?
Very well, David. Thank you. How are you?
Terrific. I'm very well. Great to have you on today. We are delighted to be joined by an audience of our members here on Zoom, and we have got a broader audience following along on the live stream on YouTube. So it's going to be a terrific 60 minutes. The idea with these sessions is to bring a bit of energy. Everyone's feeling a bit down. Everyone's feeling a bit out of power. The Power Hour is here to come and inject some business development and marketing ideas for private wealth professionals. There's a lot of generic sessions out there, but this is tailored towards people working directly with high net worth clients to give them some ideas on how they can do a bit more business. And with that in mind, throughout this hour, we're really interested to get your comments in the chat. Tell us where you're viewing from. Give us some feedback as we go. Put your questions in for Louise. Now, if they're too tricky, we might just cast them out, but we'll give them a fair crack. So please do stick your questions in the chat as we go through. We're bringing these sessions once a month, so we'll be regular as clockwork throughout the year, bringing you the freshest ideas from marketing, business development, social media strategies that you can implement, or you can implement for your colleagues. So before we get into the topic of today, which is lead generation, I'm just going to have a little chat with Lou about her background. You're based down in Jersey. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Avidity and the clients that you work with?
So Avidity was basically born out of my absolute passion for generating, I'm going to say non-fluffy marketing in the nicest sense. You know, we're not focused on open rates, we're not focused on following, we're focused on lead generation and really delivering ROI for our clients. So, and developing that entire strategy. So that's why I created Avidity Marketing, and we're now a team of 5. So we work with everyone from small startups up through to, you know, multi-7-figure finance companies. So it's a real variety, but essentially we work with anyone that wants to grow, wants to tap into a new market, or wants to essentially change the way that they utilize marketing tactics in their strategies.
Okay, and the private wealth sector is obviously very important for Jersey alongside institutional and other business. You've had experience working across institutionally focused clients as well as private wealth sector. Yep. You know, that's important for today because it gives that flavoring, doesn't it? It's a specific niche.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I worked in the finance industry for just over 10 years. Quite specifically, a lot of the time with the private client sector. So both sides of the coin. I've worked on the administration side. I've worked with law firms, and I've worked with a couple of family offices directly as well. So yeah, definitely seen all sides of the coin.
Terrific. So we're going to have a good discussion today. But first of all, just for a bit of context, I suppose, you know, COVID has driven everyone online through necessity. Mm-hmm. You know, some people were already there making good content, building their brand, building their personal name. Have you seen, you know, the time is now really for people to be thinking about good content, social media, different elements of the strategy that before perhaps were on the back burner. Are you seeing that coming through into practice?
Massively. I think there's two sides of that, in that the people that were already doing it now have a lot more competition, and the people that weren't doing it are really quickly trying to catch up with getting their message out there, getting seen, and also competing with everyone else. I think the industry is becoming quite fatigued with a lot of content, a lot of things being pushed out. So there's a real move towards creating conversation and creating a community around you. So people are numb to a kind of sales plug. They want a genuine interaction with someone that moves them kind of through an honest and genuine journey, rather than a obviously pre-prescribed and sales pitch type journey. So there's a real shift that I'm seeing, where there's a massive uptake in people that are being a bit more genuine and open in terms of how they run their business.
Interesting. And collaboration can be key. I mean, we'll get into some of the details in the presentation, but for me personally, I think one of the key things is to think creatively about collaborative content, because that softens the sales message, doesn't it? If you're speaking in conjunction with other professionals, it actually creates high quality, I think.
Absolutely. And it's that adding value. You know, if you're bringing someone else onto the scene that has a different expertise or a different opinion, you're creating a different element of value for your audience, which is really, really crucial. So yeah, definitely collaboration is key.
Okay, terrific. Right. Well, I'm just going to get the slides up, and we will start working through them. So I'm going to be throwing in questions for Louise as we go through. I've also got one eye on the chat, so please do, as soon as you see something that occurs to you, drop it in the chat and we'll bring it up live. So first of all, Louise, the marketing life cycle, an important concept. Do you want to walk us through this and what you think it means for the professionals?
Yes, absolutely. So I think one of the key things for me is that a lot of people will focus on the front side, so the prospect marketing, and that's all your marketing tactics that you're quite used to. So your social media, your email marketing, your events, your hospitality, all of those things that you do to generate interest in your business. But what a lot of people don't necessarily think about is how you then pull them through in a really pre-designed journey to becoming a client and then maintaining that client. So, I mean, obviously, hopefully everyone here knows that the maintenance of your clients is the cheapest form of marketing. So it's quite key to have that planned out. But essentially the life cycle is looking at, if you're going to launch a campaign, making sure that you've not just thought about, right, this is how we're going to get the message out of there. It's like, okay, how are we going to engage them in conversation? How are we then going to nurture those leads? How are we going to convert them? And then how are we going to maintain those clients and make sure that they have the luxury experience that this sector it requires and is the expectation of our sector, that it's a luxury experience and you don't leave anything left unturned. The whole ethos around my business is that there is no stone left unturned and every facet of that journey is planned out to perfection before you launch anything. So that's a really kind of generic overview.
On the prospect marketing side, I mean, if you're a trust company or a bank, perhaps you would have relied on high quality events, conferences, certain conferences through the year which got the main introducers of business like the tax and legal advisors together, or a family office conference that was going to be attractive enough for your potential clients to actually come and get in the room together. Now, obviously, that has been chopped. How are you seeing, because this is the start of the funnel, isn't it? So how are you seeing firms reestablishing that funnel through other means? Face to face is key, but we can't do nothing. So what is it that have you been observing any firms keeping their prospecting going using other strategies?
I think, to be honest, everyone is struggling a little bit.
Yeah.
I've not come across a single person that's reached out to me that isn't saying that they're struggling in some way or another right now.
Yeah.
But I think the key thing is that you need to be really, really targeted. So there's definitely, you can't do any more of this. This is a piece of content for everyone that we want to engage with. It just doesn't work like that anymore. People will just skim over it. You have to be really, really specific and kind of say, this is for you if it's almost like, do you have these problems? Great, this piece of content is for you. So you have to be really, really specific in that niching environment now. You can't just be generic. It just doesn't work anymore. There's too much stuff out there. So when it comes to your content strategy in particular, which realistically is everyone's kind of main source of prospect marketing, you've really got to be specific and break your audience down into the different people that you're targeting. So if you're speaking to a specific type of lawyer, speak to that specific type of lawyer. Don't try and incorporate all the other people like accountants and tax advisors and structurers into that, because it's just not going to resonate. If you are creating a piece of generic content, make sure that it is offering value in a different way. So if it's speaking to a particular change in the market, a regulatory change, a legal update, make sure that you then say how it affects those different audiences so that they each have something to take away from it. So that's kind of the key thing that I'd say to make yourself stand out. Niche down and really kind of speak to your audiences individually.
And I mean, webinars can be useful for gathering data points, can't they? So that in that sense, prospect, something niche that gathers an audience can be useful it's not a replacement to face-to-face, but it is a data point, isn't it? It can be a lead that can be used in this conversion cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as well, if you're creating lots of different things for different audiences, you get a taste of what that audience reacts to. Whereas it's actually a lot harder if you're creating generic things to understand who's engaged with what. You can do it, it's just a lot harder. So if you kind of go, right, well, this is for directly for prospects in the Middle East, let's say, you can kind of say, well, okay, they obviously don't react to this type of content. Let's try a video, or let's try a webinar. And there is a bit of trial and error. But if you're speaking directly to that audience all the time, you can get a taste of what they react to and what they engage with, and then you can capitalize on that.
Interesting. So on the engagement then, on engaging in indirect conversation, the next step on.
Yeah. So yeah, that's super key. And I think I've gone into detail a little bit about that later. But a lot of us are using our content and kind of going, cool, that's great, we've spoken to our audience, but have you actually engaged in direct conversation with your prospects or your third-party prospects? So that's kind of the real key thing, and I think a lot of people forget about marketing. So everything I always do will lead to a point of conversation. So be that they're downloading something or they're registering for something that gives you their details and that they consent for you to contact them, so that you can then start that direct dialogue with either the person that's going to be their relationship manager or the person that's going to be their salesperson, whoever that point of contact is in your business. Making sure that you have that opportunity to start that conversation is really key in your marketing.
Okay, thanks. I think the embedded call to action, critical, and something that you actually don't see enough of probably in the professional space.
Yeah, 100%.
And so on the lead marketing, then you've gone through the first few phases. Yes.
So lead marketing, again, it's something that I think in the industry people are quite unique about it, in a sense that a lead comes in and they think, right, I now have to be incredibly personal and only go back one-on-one to that lead, but actually you don't know where they are in their decision-making process yet necessarily. So if someone, say for example, downloads a guide that you've created or registers for a webinar, they might just be exploring, they might be a year away from making the decision, so they don't necessarily want that hard sales pitch yet. So helping them move through that journey from just interested and just listening in to actually asking for a proposal of services is something that can be automated. So for example, they've downloaded this particular piece of content, so a week later you can send another piece of valuable content that relates to that. 3 days later you could say, oh, if you want to speak to one of our experts, feel free to book in a meeting. If there are certain softwares, depending on what you have in house, you can see if they spent a certain amount of time on a particular web page, then you can send a follow-up. Don't say that you saw they spent that time on their webpage, that's just creepy, but you can follow up with a particular piece of content that is relevant, so you're starting to pick up that data and know what they're interested in. So that's really, really important, is moving them through that buying process from initial potential interest, not knowing exactly where they are in that buying process, and hopefully moving them through and helping them get to that point where they're like, okay, I need to speak to these guys, they know what they're talking about, they've given me lots of value, I think I'm ready to have a conversation.
And the sequencing of messages there, putting thought into that is critical. And again, I think is something, the analytical side is with all this data that's coming back, and that A/B testing, kind of working out what works for your prospects.
Yeah, absolutely.
Into then the conversion strategy and tactics.
Yes. So conversion is an interesting one, and it's something I've worked quite extensively with my clients on, how they pitch and how they present. But I think one thing that's always really interesting is that in that scenario, we kind of forget all of that value. And then we go, oh, great, we can talk about ourselves now. Here's everything. Here's why we're so incredible. But actually, they still want it to be about them. They still want to know that you're talking about their pain points, that you understand what they're going through, what they want to achieve, their goals. So keep focusing it around them, make them audience led. So don't make them about your services and how you decided to break down your business as a service provider. Make it about your audience. So if you're pitching to a lawyer about who you are and what you do, it's like, we understand that lawyers want this. This is how we solve that problem. This is how we add value to you. So rather than it being like, oh, we do all of this, we're great. You've got to flip it on its head and make it audience led.
Okay, interesting. And then the final part is, the client base you have, activating that client base, those valuable contacts that are already, in your Rolodex. How you do more with your existing clients is the big tool in private banking today. This is a big source of business, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think in this particular sector, there's always something else that you can do. There's always more that you can upsell, cross-sell, refer, and never forget that. I think you can often get complacent with clients. They're in the door, and as long as you're delivering that service that you've agreed, they're fine. But actually, in the private wealth sector, we're dealing with people that are used to the absolute luxury, the absolute best in the business. So never get complacent in that, and make sure that you're always offering that extra value. So if there is a piece of content that you're producing that is relevant to some of your clients, tailor it to them and be like, I thought you'd find this of interest, happy to speak you through this, let's get together. Don't just rely on that standard level of service that you've delivered. Always treat your clients as leads, and kind of move them through that sales funnel again. You can't just suddenly go, oh, I thought you might be interested in this, here you go. Make sure that you're kind of helping them and helping them to see that if you want to cross-sell, this isn't just what we do. Give them that bigger picture, but in a non-salesy, valuable way.
Okay. So the principles of good marketing. So why don't you walk us through this slide?
Yes. So the key thing here is that a lot of people will approach us and say, oh, we just want to run this social media campaign and it's all about lead generation. But they don't want to do any of the preparatory work. And actually, I'm kind of at a point where I refuse to work with clients that don't want to do this work because it's fundamental to good marketing. So it goes back to that point that I've already made, that understanding who your exact target audience is, and be specific. Are they in a certain jurisdiction? Are they a certain age? Are they do they enjoy certain activities? What is it, what platforms are they on? Have all of that information and really kind of think about how you want to target, and think about why you want to target them. Is it because there's a market share that you can grab? Is it that you've got the capacity to offer that service, but actually people don't know you do it, and it's about building that awareness? So think about why you want to target those audiences and have a goal in mind with each of those audiences. And then it's about, where are they online? So what keywords do they search for? And just to explain in case anyone doesn't know, literally what are they typing into Google when they search for these kinds of things? And you can break that down by audience type, jurisdiction. So you can make sure that you build your content around that. What type of content do they engage in? It's no point in producing 2,000 word article if they're going to watch, if all they want to do is watch a 30-second video. So you need to understand what type of content they engage in. What hashtags do they use? Make yourself searchable. What are they following? So those things are really, really crucial to help you get your voice out there.
Last month's session with Graham Aiken, he was talking about working with a client on LinkedIn where they were focusing on, they've been getting success out of private equity professionals in Geneva. And by using search functionality on LinkedIn in quite a direct way, you can see a kind of population forming. And so I think in the who and in defining your customer avatar, using these tools, it doesn't have to be a fluffy exercise, does it? It's like sort of going in for like, right, this is my ideal type of client, or this is the client I'm set up to serve. And then like LinkedIn or others, as you say, just generally, navigating around the web, thinking about the different places people pick up information and where you can come across these people online.
Yeah, and it goes across so many things. So if you find out that one of your target audiences is searching in Google for private wealth professionals, for example, put that in your LinkedIn header. That's what they're searching for. They're probably going to search it on LinkedIn as well. So, and that will help you rank in Google for that particular search term, your own personal LinkedIn profile or your corporate one. So that's kind of where it brings it all together, is like, right, identifying who are the people in your business who are going to front this, who are going to be the people that this target audience go to, and then make sure that their entire profile, both, I'm not just talking about LinkedIn, their entire business and corporate profile for you is centered around that. Don't, again, like obviously they might have other services that they dabble in, but this is their primary focus, that target audience, that's who they're about, that's where they add the value, that's where they focus. So yeah, really, really key.
If you go down that route of being specific, you cut yourself off to other business, in the sense of, if you're a lawyer or a banker, you might be targeting people, say, in private equity, but you've also got a few other clients around, and you don't want to put those people off by saying, how do you square that circle? Do you just confident in your convictions? It's a competitive marketplace. If you don't show what you're actually interested in and build it, you're going to get
that. People do get really nervous. It's like, oh, but what if I cut off this audience? Or have someone else in your business that is covering that, so that if they come in and say, I need to speak to someone about this, great, this is your person. If you try and speak to everyone, you'll end up speaking to no one. If you're trying to be too many things to too many people, whereas what you want to say is like, I am an absolute expert in this. I understand everything about you, what your problems are, what you want to achieve. I am the person to help you. So if you try and do that to too many people, it's like, well, hang on, but you're also an expert in this. So how can you give me your undivided attention on this side? So you've got to kind of see it from that perspective of your client as well.
Interesting. Do carry on.
So the journey, this is really, really important. And it goes back to that first slide, is what is the journey you're taking them on? Like, the last thing you want to do is engage them in social and they get to your website and the page isn't relevant, or there's nowhere for them to go from there. You've not designed what happens once they've clicked on that article or video. So designing that entire journey from the previous slide, how are you going to move them through remarketing campaigns, calls to actions, chatbot automation? How are you going to do that? And the plan. So nothing annoys me more than a marketing campaign without a goal. So got to have your goals and KPIs figured out. What are you actually trying to achieve with this campaign or with this target audience? Do you want to increase your market share? Do you want to increase your revenue? Do you want to create a evergreen lead pipeline? Or is it at this point you just want to build your reputation and awareness of the service that you offer? So just make sure that you have that goal defined. What is the plan? What do you want to do? And then before you do anything, make sure all of it is built. Like every web page, every email, every social media post, don't launch anything until from A to Z is built and done and you're happy with it, it's tested. Because again, in this world, one automation goes wrong, one web link doesn't work, you're out. They will just move on to someone else unless they know you. Slightly different, but if it's a cold lead and something goes wrong in your web journey or it doesn't resonate, that's it, you've lost them. So it's really important to get that build really right before you go out to market.
And within bigger brands, and we might come on to this in a bit more detail shortly, but it's important for the front office to really have a good relationship with the marketing team to understand how their own personal marketing fits in with the business, or to create opportunities for them. If they proactively go to marketing team with ideas, there might be scope to actually do more, not to sort of think about it as your sole journey to try and win business. Against odds, be a bit collaborative internally as well, particularly if you're part of a bigger brand.
The internal stuff is so important in any service industry, let alone the private sector. So it's really important that those people that you've identified as being the face of that service or that proposition that you're pushing out have to be absolutely embedded in the campaign. They need to be as if it was their own campaign, as if they've run it, which obviously as marketers, you can kind of got to take that, but they are the face of that service, and it's really important that they're seen as that. They're seen as the people that are driving that value, pushing it out into the market. So that should be part of your entire plan and journey that you build, is how are they engaging? You should have an entire process mapped out. Right, at this point, John, email this lead that's come in, then the automation will kick off. You should have every single thing mapped out, and everyone in the business should know exactly where they stand at every point.
Okay, terrific. Just moving. Sorry,
I probably should have sent it to you in PowerPoint. It might have been easier.
Yeah.
So this goes back to kind of what I was saying about not making it about you. I see nothing gets me more on LinkedIn than when you see a paid ad on LinkedIn, a promoted feed post where it's kind of, we offer this, we are the best at this, we do this. It's not going to get you anywhere, or if it does, you're very lucky. It's very unlikely that you're going to get the results out of that kind of ad that you want. So this is essentially the content journey that you should be taking them on. So their needs. So if you're at that point of sale or on your website or anything other than in the kind of more social side of your tactics. So translating your solutions into relatable problems and needs, and speaking to one audience at a time, which we've already touched on, so I won't go back over that. But what do your solutions solve the problem of? And I think that's something that we often forget. It's like, oh, well, we can offer you kind of multi-jurisdictional structuring or wealth preservation or whatever those things are that you're offering. What problem is that solving? Speak to that first rather than giving them the solution. Because what we do, think of all the thumb scrolling we do. You want something to stop you, and if you see something, it's like, is this your problem? Are you struggling with this, or do you need this to help you move forward, whatever that need or problem is? So you're identifying it and making people stop rather than seeing a solution to a problem they might not have actually realized they have yet. So that's really, really key in how you position yourselves. And then you go in with your solutions. How do you as a business solve those problems and needs? Again, keeping it focused on them and their problems, but how are you offering solutions to that? Backing it up, why you? I'm going to, a little bit of a harsh truth here. What makes you different? And please don't say your people. All of you say your people. So you can't all have the best people in the business. So what makes you different? You don't have to be better, you just have to be different. That's really, really key. So is that you have a really unique onboarding process that gets everything done quicker? Do you have a way of working with all the KYC that means that it's not a laborious process? What is it?
I mean, a regional focus, I think, in the global sort of trust or banking industry is quite an interesting positioning for clients that is relevant, because what it means is if you've got a lot of clients in, say, East Africa, it means that if that client is relying on you meeting them and seeing them and keeping a relationship with them, they know that you'll have a reason to be there and you're committed to that market. I think
absolutely that. And that's a really, really good point. Yeah, really, really good point. If you're targeting a specific audience, using your example of Africa, do you have boots on the ground? Why are you focusing on that audience? What makes you the person to be there and be there for that audience? So it's much easier to say why you're the best when you're niching down like that, because you can give a unique situation to that audience rather than trying to speak of it as a large corporate, which is harder for them to relate to. So yeah, very, very good point. When you're being specific like that, it's much easier to give them that evidence and that reason.
And also it has to be demonstrated over time, doesn't it? So like, it doesn't, you can present why you, but you have to actually plant that seed and then evidence it, isn't it? It's not just a one-off pitch. It's just the client see you actually coming back. Is the prospect rather than the client, sorry, are you taking them on that journey? You can't necessarily prove everything overnight, but you can prove things over a period as 100%. To why you, isn't it?
I think that's the thing. The days of that, quick card sell are gone, and you've got to be thinking 6 months ahead, really, in terms of pipeline. How are we going to get to where we want to be at the end of the year? So if you have a specific revenue goal or lead gen goal for 6 months to a year, you need to start doing that marketing now. Because absolutely, it takes time to build that reputation as a value provider in the market. So yeah, really important that this isn't just, we want results in a month's time. It's not impossible if you've got a reputation already in that market, but if you're going in pretty cold into a new market or a new audience set, then yeah, it's definitely going to be tricky. So you've got to give it time.
Absolutely. Time horizon is key, being realistic about particularly building private wealth services, referrals, confidence and trust. And the product set is not so unique that people kind of move on it straight away. Yeah. It's a slow burn, but if you put
and also, a lot of the time you've got to think they're most likely with another provider. So one thing that's quite key is really understanding why they're even thinking about moving. Going back to that kind of early lead journey. So if you know that they're with a competitor, but they've registered for your event or they've downloaded your guide. Okay, right, interesting. So what is it? And make sure that you never do that thing that they're dissatisfied about. But helping, that's how you can start the conversation. It's like, we've noticed, is there something that we can help you with? Is there something you're not getting from your current provider? And then build that content around that. Yeah, and then the evidence, as you say, like the evidence is really key. You've got to back it up. It's almost every single industry is like TripAdvisor right now. They want to see the testimonials, they want to see the ratings, they want to see the evidence. You can't just say you're great, you have to prove it. Which is difficult in this sector, and I understand there's a lot of confidentiality and people don't often want to put their name to things, but I think we're slowly breaking out of that and seeing more people willing to kind of put their names to case studies and put their names to testimonials, even if it's not directly the client that's involved. It might be the lawyer or the advisor that was involved in saying these guys were great, they helped us do XYZ. And again, the case study should be about how you solved that audience's needs, not about the solutions that you provided.
Certainly, I mean, peer-to-peer reviews and things are available. You know, the end client might not want to put their name on a recommendation, but, you know, certainly their advisors around them should be able to, if you've done a good job, provide some kind of recommendation. So it's just thinking about who those people are who could provide that recommendation on a peer-to-peer platform.
Absolutely. But again, take it back to your audience. It's like, do you have an existing situation that's really similar to that target that you're hitting? And be like, we've worked with exactly the same kind of person. We've got the people ready to go. We've got the systems and processes ready to go. We understand you. Here's an example. So yeah, it's just about always being focused on that.
Okay, right. So then, looking at content that converts, talk us through this one.
Okay, so again, I feel like this whole thing is me moaning about bugbears on with people's marketing, but please stop publishing standalone content. Publishing one article and hoping it's going to do something for you, it's not going to work. You might get the odd like, you might get someone commenting on it, but it's not going to convert and get you leads and business, which is, let's be honest, what we want. So when you think about publishing an article, what else are you doing around that? Go and talk about other, go and comment on other things in the similar subject space, go and start a conversation, ask people questions, do an event off the back of it. If it's a really particular piece of relevant content or valuable content, run a webinar. It's like, we're going to be discussing this, come and join. It's an opportunity to network. Don't just publish standalone content. If you do just want to do a pure content strategy, make sure that there are lots of other complementary articles all talking to that same audience, or videos, or whatever that content piece is you're doing. So don't just put an article up and think that that's kind of going to get you anywhere. It's not going to get you anywhere. So you've really got to think about how it all comes together and how all your content works together to move that audience through your journey. So my key thing is kind of exactly that reputation and awareness, which is that difficult piece. It's that slightly intangible marketing thing, is knowing how many people are aware of what you do and who you are. So all of your content should be working together to build that reputation. So at that stage, it's not necessarily about that conversion, but it is about making sure that everyone in your target audience is aware of what you do and you have a reputation for being value driven and at the forefront of your industry. That's what we're all after at that stage.
So then and visibility, isn't it? I mean, if it takes so many touch points to do business, but also it takes a number of digital touch points perhaps to even get on that radar of one-to-one. So it's about that, isn't it? Putting enough out there, as you say, in a specific targeted way for the visibility to strike, so that when the name is mentioned, it's like, there's a subconscious awareness of what you're about. And
exactly that. I mean, I think there's always been things. I think David Blaine did something a while ago where he conned some advertisers into doing an advert for him, and he planted things on the way, and he basically predicted what the advert was going to be. And that's exactly what you're doing at this stage. You're basically planting that seed in the back of their head, but you've got to be consistently present. You can't just publish an article and then nothing for a month and then a video and then nothing. You've got to have that consistency. There's a lot of debate in the marketing industry is how many touch points it takes. From my experience, it takes between 10 and 15 touch points, depending on the sector and depending on the industry, for them to become a lead, and quite a cold lead at that even. So it's really important that you're really consistent, and again, consistent with that audience and in that market, not just generically consistent. So you've got to have everything broken down. So it might be that as a larger organization, you're actually pushing out, 3 pieces of content a day, but they're tailored to a specific audience set. So yeah, it's difficult.
Isn't it? It is about, say, email, but it is about other social platforms that people are on, because for people to discover you and for them to feel like you're visible, you need to think about what your strategy is across platforms, isn't it, in order to build that
and tailor it for your platforms. I think this is one thing that that is often forgotten, is that, I'll just copy and paste it across Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Snapchat, TikTok, whatever you're doing. But you've got to think in this sector in particular, if you're starting to speak to that second generation coming through, they're younger. They might be on TikTok or Snapchat or Instagram, not LinkedIn. And what they want to hear is not what their mum or dad wants to hear. So you know, you've really got to think about tailoring that message. So if you're trying to get into that younger generation now, for the future, so that's a longer term campaign strategy, you know, planting that seed when they're kind of just coming up to taking over from mum and dad, and getting them while they're young, literally, so that by the time they get to that point, you're the natural choice because they've seen all your content, they've engaged with you, they know who you are. So yeah, it's really, really important, and a longer term strategy, that top piece. Yeah, so again, relationship, all of your content should have the objective of sparking conversation. So either in the comments directly, where you can then take it offline and say, I'd love to chat further with you on this, like drop me an email, but creating a direct relationship. So a relationship to me isn't someone that you just added to your system and kind of plop, they're now a contact in your CRM. You have to have engaged in a direct conversation, sent them an email and they've responded. That's when that relationship starts forming. And all of your content should have that objective, no matter what type of content it is. And then once you spark that conversation, you can get into the individual, you get to know the individual, you understand their pain points by asking them, and then you work on selling them your services through that journey we've kind of already discussed, the lead automation, the conversion, and then hopefully the client, which is obviously where the revenue comes in.
Okay, great.
Okay.
So looking here at the customer journey, take us through this one.
So this is basically just a visualization and example of what I've been talking about. So you've launched your content, you engage with your audience with unique and valuable content, and it's tailored to them. So obviously you want them to come through onto your website. And so you have to have that call to action. But what you probably should have is a custom landing page for that piece of content. Don't just take them onto an article page within your website. The problem with that is that there's nowhere for them to really go if you do that. And they're obviously much more likely to go off elsewhere. What you really want them to do is follow your pre-prescribed journey that you designed. So if you have a custom landing page, it's all about them, all about how they react to that piece of content, what they need to know about that piece of content. It has to make sense. Don't just take them to a place on your website that isn't related to the content that they come from. Sometimes I've seen people, sometimes they take it through to someone's bio and it's like, well, hang on, I wanted to be on that page to read more about what you're talking about. But then also I think a lot of the time we leave it, even if you have taken them through to a custom article page, we leave it there. It's like, okay, you're done, thanks. So what do you want them to do from that point? How are you getting that conversation started? Do you have a chat box? Do you have a video from the head of that product or the head of that service kind of explaining things in further detail so that they're getting that personal touch from the head of that service? How are you starting that conversation? Don't underestimate the power of chatbots on your website. I know, again, in this industry, a lot of people are a bit like, oh, no one wants to chat with us. It works. It's like, how many times have we all been on a website? It's like, if you have to go out, email someone, do loads of other things, you're not going to do it. But actually, if I can just ask a quick question in that chat box, you're going to do it. So don't underestimate the importance of that in any industry. And not many people are doing it in the private client industry. So capitalize on that.
Yeah, it's a simple convenience, isn't it? If the thing pops up and you've already inputted maybe your first name and your email, and you say, oh, I'm actually really interested in, a Jersey fund structure or corporate structure, because you've landed on their website.
Exactly that. And it's like, oh, even if they're talking about that content specifically, it's like, oh, does that affect me? I'm this X, Y, and Z. And then you know what they are, where they're situated, their problem. So you're starting that conversation, you're getting that intel on that person. If they do leave your website, you need to be remarketing to them. We've all seen it. You look at that jumper on your favorite fashion website and then you see it for weeks on end until you eventually buy it because it pops up on your Google ads. It's exactly that. This industry is not unique in a sense that it shouldn't capitalize on that. So if they, they're interested if they have clicked on your article and have read through it. So you could have a remarketing campaign that's, they've gone on this landing page, but they haven't completed that second call to action. So start remarketing to them, get them back on that page and get them completing that second call to action. Really important that you think about how you entice them back onto your page if they do leave, because some of them will, it's inevitable. So make sure that you're doing everything you can to get them back.
Okay, interesting. And what do you think about things like, using surveys and creating research reports with your kind of target audience if you're being a bit more collaborative. So your content piece can come out of actually your interaction with your introducer base, if you like. I mean, I've seen more firms in the wealth sector using that as a strategy. I'd imagine it's quite a good one if done well.
It's really, really good if done well. I think there's two sides to that. There's obviously the paid survey where you pay someone to go off and do your survey. You know, there's a lot of people in the industry doing it. I think people are a little less, they see a little less value from the payer in that. But if you have the capacity or you have the inclination in-house to do it, or collaborate with someone in the industry, so you're getting access to their audience as well, really, really powerful. I mean, everyone loves data. Everyone loves to know what the industry thinks about the next trends, the next developments, what's coming up. So really, really powerful as a piece of content. But gate it. This is the other thing that I always send it to your database. So send it out automatically to your CRM, you know, the contacts in your CRM system. But gate the content, make them fill in a form if they want it, position it as being really valuable. You know, if you're this person, again, audience specific, if you're this person, you cannot make do for the rest of the year without this report or this survey or this data. Make them fill in the form. Then you've got your details. Then you put them into a lead drip automation and feed them that copy. So it's just all about getting their details and starting that conversation, no matter what content you're doing. But yeah, surveys very valuable.
So that survey could be fed out in your social media without giving the whole game, little teasers.
And you can pull so much content from a big survey like that. You know, you can pull white papers out and push it specifically to a market. So surveys are usually broader based. So they, you know, I've just been working on one with a client, not in the private client sector, but it's all about the infrastructure industry. And it's quite broad as a whole, but within it are chapters that are focused on specific asset classes. So you can pull those out and push them to those audience bases and so on. So you can make that copy work really, really hard. And that's, again, really key. So again, don't think that you can't reuse copy. You really, really can. If it hasn't got the traction, reposition it and push it back out again. So yeah, you don't feel like you have to be producing a new survey every week. Make it work. I think I've made a survey work for a good 6 months before. So it's like you can definitely keep it going for as long as you want.
Great. Just looking then at the funnel, the Evergreen Funnel. You know, we just touched on a few of these things here, but why don't you explain?
So I think, again, like there's a bit of a thing of, you know, how do we create consistent leads coming in? And you often think that you have to do a big event or a big launch or a big survey to get leads coming in again. But actually, again, it's just, as I said, about making that content work hard or making that piece of marketing work hard for you. So gated content, reports, surveys, how-tos, legal and regulatory updates. So again, you wouldn't gate it for your existing contact bases. That's a value add for someone that already knows you and is engaged with you. But for people that don't give it away for nothing. If it's really valuable, gate it. And just in case anyone doesn't know what I mean, is you have to fill in a form to get it. They don't have to pay for it. They just have to fill in a form. So then you've automatically got a lead, like a cold lead, but you know they're interested in what you're doing. They you know that they want to hear what you have to say. So it's a good starting point. So building that reputation around value content. So the more you do it, the more people will almost wait for your voice in that particular situation. So you want to get to that point where it's like, well, I'm going to wait to hear what these guys have to say because they're always producing the best thoughts on this. So that's where you want to be with your content, so they're happy to fill in the information. Retargeting, which we've touched on, so Google Ads, remarketing, landing pages, LinkedIn, PPC. Again, knowing what those search terms are. PPC can be expensive to invest in, but if you're doing it in a quite niche way, it's when you get really broad, where it's like, I'm going to target the whole world and, you know, all of these search terms, that's when it gets really expensive. But if you're being really, really specific, you can actually do it on a much smaller budget. And it just makes sure that you're at the top of Google when they search for it. I wouldn't necessarily advocate it for every audience. It depends on the audience and what you're doing. But really important that you're utilizing those things. If people have been on your website, retarget them. Really, really important. And you can do that in different ways. You can do it through a Facebook ad, depending on if they're on Facebook. You can do it through LinkedIn, but always have content being pushed out in the background for people to find. Make your content as evergreen as possible. Obviously, there's always going to be kind of peaks and troughs in terms of changes in the industry and trends, but there's going to be content that you can keep using for a while, and make sure that people can always find it. So make sure the landing page is searchable, make sure that you've got remarketing attached to it, and make sure that it's relevant for a decent amount of time. Try not to be too reactive to the market, try and be more proactive and think about what's going to last a bit longer. Your reactive content can be a bit more standalone. COVID, perfect example. Obviously everyone put an article out of what next for COVID, after COVID. I think everyone got a bit bored of reading what COVID's done and how it's changed the industry. So if you are going to put reactive content out, make sure that it's valuable and make sure that you're saying something that no one else isn't. Really, really important. And then campaign structure. So when you're putting campaigns together, there is obviously going to be an initial push. So if you have done a big survey or a big report or you know, a big event, whatever that thing is, when the world is allowed to do events again, do your launch, have lots of marketing activity around it, PR, webinars, roundtables, social media, direct emails, have lots going on, make it impossible to miss with your target audience, and then drip it down and maintain. So make it audience led. The maintenance needs to be audience led again. So again, those automation drips, pushing out, oh, you know, I don't know if you saw this in this report, here's that article again, it was gated, but we're now giving you this for free. So maintaining that big splash that you've got, and never just launch a campaign and move on to the next. You've got to maintain that presence. Again, it's about that constant presence in the market. So always design your campaigns with a kind of launch, drip it down, and then maintain. So, and then you should see a nice steady pipeline of lead generation coming through.
Oh, that's the end. So I'm just going to stop sharing so we can go back screen. Yeah, we've got 10 more minutes. Please do put your questions in the chat. We can bring them up live for Louise. Thank you for that presentation, though. I mean, are there any, particularly from the private wealth sector, are there any standout examples, do you think, of brands that do well in this space? I mean, one that comes to mind for me, I think Equim do a very good job at actually like having a consistent message. They LinkedIn, they're very strong. They get the team talking. You know, they put these campaign strategies kind of into effect, and I think that as an organisation, they're very strong on marketing. But I mean, who do you see as examples of businesses that you think are doing well or doing something interesting?
I say anyone. I don't like naming organisations kind of just to make anyone feel left out. I say, to be honest, the people that are putting their people forward. Let's be honest, this is an industry where people buy people. You know, it's not uncommon for a lawyer to move law firms and take all their clients follow. So I think anyone that is putting their people at the forefront of this, so making their staff raise their profiles on LinkedIn, say something a bit different. I think not being afraid to say something unique. It is quite a stagnant industry with a lot of similar shop fronts. So how are people making them stand out? How is your branding really bold? Are you not afraid to ask those difficult questions? There are some people doing some great thought leadership and pushing out some really good content. I've not particularly come across anyone as of yet that's done anything that's blown my mind. So that's not an insult. I think it's just an industry that's playing catch up a little bit. It's an industry that's rested on the laurels of feet on the ground, meetings, hospitality, lunches, dinners. So it's playing catch up, which is a great thing. There's see it as a good thing. It's a way that you can go, right, how are we going to do this? How are we going to make ourselves stand out and really have that opportunity to do something different?
I mean, I've definitely seen, you know, there's on the research and survey side, you know, Intertrust had quite a big Middle East survey that was very well received. Vistra do this 2030 where they look forward. So I think there are examples there of innovative use of surveys.
100%. I mean, I don't see the stats on the back end, so I don't like to say whether they were successful or not. But yeah, absolutely. I think people are doing it. But again, you've got to be careful, because if everyone's like, oh, surveys, gated surveys are the way forward, then how are you going to make your survey stand out? How are you going to make it unique? How are you building that presence? But yeah, there are absolutely people doing the right things. Hopefully they've got those back journeys in place. I don't know. But yeah, there are people really pushing some great content out there. It's just about making it as findable as possible. And as you say, the collaboration, I think, is key. Building a community of people around you in the different spaces, so that actually you've got that full circle of opinions when you're pushing content out. It's really, really important.
And there are new platforms emerging all the time, aren't there? You know, so people can't just kind of rest on their laurels. I mean, I think we've both joined Clubhouse recently.
Yes.
A lot of hype about that, a lot of buzz.
Clubhouse.
What are you finding with Clubhouse then, as a marketing?
Clubhouse is insane. Like, I've never experienced a social media platform that has given me so many leads so quickly.
Yeah.
For anyone that doesn't know what Clubhouse is, it's, the way I describe it is a live podcast situation. So you basically set up rooms with just yourself, or you talk with someone else, and you invite people to come in and listen. They can raise their hands, they can come up and ask questions. So it is essentially a live podcast, really. Yeah. But it's mental, absolutely mental. I've had some really insane reactions. But again, it's that value driven. People want to come in and have genuine conversation with genuine people. There's no hiding on Clubhouse. If someone asks you a question live on, it's kind of like this without the video. You know, if someone asks you a question live on Clubhouse, you can't escape it. You can't fluff your way out of it.
Elon Musk was, I think, on there, which was a bit of a clue. The platform seems to be growing. But I mean, what do you think generally, just thinking about, say, podcasts? There's a lot of podcasts out there. If firms are thinking about making podcasts as part of their content strategy, what do you have any specific advice around how they should approach that specific medium?
Make it specific.
Yeah.
Exactly that. Again, it's this, content is content. It doesn't matter if it's a podcast, a video, an event, a webinar, like whatever that thing is you're doing, you've got to be speaking to a specific audience about a specific problem or a specific need or a specific trend. So yeah, I think if you're going to venture into the podcast world, make it about your area of expertise. You know, it's kind of you're showing your kind of, for lack of a better word, like zone of genius, like, you know, what's your zone, you know, and like really kind of making people want to be there because they're going to get something valuable out of it.
Okay, well, we've got a little question from Matt Gilligan. Hi, Matt, from Safri's in Guernsey. For Louise, just to say, what would you say are the posts and content to avoid when posting on your website or LinkedIn? So is there anything that you would steer clear of? Thanks, Matt.
Okay, there's two things that I would say when posting on your website or LinkedIn. Okay, there's two things that I would say you should avoid specifically: sharing someone else's content and not saying anything about it. So if you're going to share someone's content, what are your key takeaways? What do you think about it? Spark that comment. Don't just share this content and be like, interesting article from Financial Times. You know, like it's not, that's not you being the value provider. That's just you showing someone else being the value provider. So please don't do that. If you're going to share someone's article, highlight what you've taken away from it and how it relates to your audience.
Tag a few other people in it.
Exactly that, like, oh, you know, David, have you read this? Like, would love your thoughts. Like, exactly that. So don't just share another person's value. And also, I would say on LinkedIn, do not sell on LinkedIn. Or just don't do it. Don't post anything. You can do it subtly, but don't be like, oh, you know, come and talk to us about this because we're amazing. Just don't sell on LinkedIn. When it comes to your website, I think it's a bit more free for all, because obviously that is your shop window, and you can obviously sell on your website. But again, just make sure you follow that: your problems, our solutions, why we're the best, and then you're kind of not doing it in such a salesy way.
And perhaps people might not have considered, because your main website has to talk to a lot of different audiences, to have tactical kind of microsites for specific campaigns.
One of the trends that I am definitely capitalizing on right now is, if anyone wants to do a new website, I would actually say have a very, very basic static website that's your kind of, you know, intotrust.com or whatever it is. And then everything else is a fluid landing page that actually, only if you're part of that audience, or if you find that link or find that search term, that's what you see, and it's very specific. So have a very basic group website that highlights who you are and what you do, you know, group communities, like high level news. But everything else is fluid. I think we're really moving away from that static website and into a much more kind of bespoke and niche landing page type environment. So
it can be have a fresher look, be a bit more streamlined, not so bloated, loads of tabs down the left hand side talking about every different product that you have. Then do your talking elsewhere in places that you can measure. So
exactly
you know, in Matt's case, and Safri's have branched out. They've got new business coming, going to new jurisdictions and things like that. There's a story to tell. And I think that's quite interesting to think about how you do that.
If you're launching a new office somewhere, you know, have a unique journey for them, build custom landing pages, you know, even for the people involved. Don't just send them off to your website for their bios. Have custom bios that are for that audience. Going back to that question you had about like if they have multiple hats, that is sometimes a way to do it. If you don't have a big enough team to have a person per audience, you have custom landing pages for that audience where their bio is tailored to that audience, and then they might have a different bio elsewhere for a different audience. So, you know, that can be a way around it, but don't ever like just pull them to a generic place on a website that doesn't relate back. So one thing that you see quite commonly is like their job title, for example, might be like head of tax advisory, for example, but actually the journey that you've put them on is nothing to do, you know, it's actually about structuring for, I'm kind of shooting out random words, but you know, that doesn't make sense. They're like, well, hang on, why am I speaking to the head of tax about how I, you know, like it just might not make sense. So just make sure that you might even have a fluid job title. I know it sounds mental, but it's not. I've seen it before and it works. You just have to focus on, you know, that journey and tailoring that content to that journey. So yeah,
I'm thinking about the customer and how they perceive it, not about how you look at it internally in your org chart and all of that.
Exactly that. I've seen a lot where people kind of structure their services and they're like, I've been somewhere before where it's like, well, we want to call it this service. It's like, well, that's not what people in the industry are calling it. So they're not going to find it because they're not going to search for it. They're not going to resonate with what that is. They're just going to be like, what does that even mean? What am I getting out of that? What do you do? So everything coming back to what the audience wants.
Great. Well, there is time for a final question. Do stick it in the chat. We've got 3 more minutes to go. But I'll just ask you a question quickly in the absence of a final question from the audience. Next time we're going to build on and do a focus on LinkedIn company pages, because there's quite a lot of work to kind of drill back into. Our audience likes sort of a LinkedIn guides is very popular with us. I mean, what do you think, looking on that topic of LinkedIn company pages and content created for that channel, is there anything you see that people within those businesses should be thinking about, should be working with marketing teams on? Obviously picking up on what we talked about today, but is there something specific to those channels that you think make them effective and resonate with people?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of argument at the moment around that kind of personal profile versus corporate profile. Both have equal standing. I think your personal profile in this industry and specifically is probably more important than the corporate profile. But the corporate profile again is kind of a shop window. It's an overview of everything that you're doing. You know, so it will speak to multiple audiences at a time, and it will have that kind of holistic view. I would personally try and steer clear of it being personal, you know, like promotions or, you know, things like do your audience, unless your audience specifically care, and you know your audience care about that, but do they really care that someone was made a senior associate? Probably not. And actually you're like, oh, but it gets the best engagement. It's probably all from your staff. Take a look at who's liked it. So yes, those things get really great engagement, but not from the right people. So I'd say from your corporate perspective, you just really want it to show you as that, you know, absolute industry leader, lots of valuable content, lots of links through to your website, really kind of engaging in conversation with people from a broad area. So use it as your thought leadership shop window.
Great. Well, look, thank you for joining us today, Lou. It's been great to chat to you.
Thank you for having me.
People should follow Louise on social media. Reach out to her if you want to explore any of the things that we discussed today. If you think there's an opportunity to do something.
And if you have any other questions, please feel free to get in touch. Happy to answer any.
Perfect. And I hope you tune in next month. We'll be back with some more LinkedIn content with Melanie Goodman from Geneva, who's going to walk us through some of the LinkedIn corporate page strategies. So I hope you tune in then, but I wish you a very good day.
Thanks so much.